This is the Vegetation and Fuels section for the Magone project area. What we'll be covering in this production is the existing condition, the fire regimes, and historical vegetation. The plant association groups we are working with are those described in the David C. Powell et al. Document shown here. The existing plant association groups in the Magone project area are predominantly warm-dry associations. Of the forested area, which is anything over 10% canopy cover, 64% of the upland forest is within the warm-dry plant association group. Hot-dry adds another 16%, so about 80% of the Magone project is in hot or warm-dry structures. This map shows all plant association groups, including forested lands, shrublands, and grasslands. Cooler associations are shown in green, and the hotter associations in yellow and red. The structure of much of the Magone area falls in the stem exclusion category. At this point, there are many trees outcompeting other trees, which stunts or kills the trees that are not competing as well. Many of the places that are in young forest multistrata have a component of older trees, with many young trees, especially fir, coming in underneath to compete with the existing older trees. In some areas that historically have been more open, conifers have added to competition to many sites that were previously open, with scattered mountain mahogany and a few scattered ponderosa pine. The northeast edge of the project area overlaps with a portion of the County Road 18 project, and that area has been thinned from below in the past couple of years. The yellow in this map displays the forest structures as they exist in the Magone area. The lime green areas are those areas in the young forest multistrata, with the lower story having a lot of fir and juniper encroachment into the open areas. This chart shows how our current conditions in Magone relate to the range of historic variability. The stem exclusion closed canopy, or SECC, is far higher than the historic range. The old forest multistory is also a bit above historic range, while old forest single story is below the historic numbers. The stand density index is the absolute or relative number of trees per acre that an even age stand would have and at a standard average DBH. As the trees get bigger, to keep the same stand density index, there would need to be fewer trees. Higher stand densities have historically led to higher susceptibility in mountain pine beetle attack. In California, Oregon, and Washington, one study suggested that an SDI of 230 to 270 in ponderosa pine stands are critical thresholds for when mountain pine beetle mortality becomes serious. The stands in this slide show areas that are of an SDI that have 250 or greater. There is evidence of most of the major insects and diseases within the project area. Felinus has created a few small openings, taking out fir species, leaving openings for pine and larch to come in. In many areas, mistletoe has infected Douglas fir that was affected by the 1980 spruce budworm outbreak. Most species have some level of mistletoe infection throughout the project, some more and some less in different areas. At this time, we have no specific data for aspen. We hope to get that together when all of the specialists get together next. At this time, there's about 2,000 acres of plantations that are in need of more maintenance. Some have had some pre-commercial thinning done in the past, but are ready to have some commercial thinning done at this time. This slide shows past vegetation treatments within or near the project area. Some of those past treatments are within current inventoried roadless boundary. Past treatments include a few older clear cuts, some areas of thinning from below, as well as some noxious weed eradication areas. The red stars are past known fire starts, fires that have at some point had personnel on them to extinguish them within the last 100 years. These are fires that we actually recorded and might not represent all of the fires that have occurred in the area. These fires range from 1/10 of an acre to about 20 acres in size. As of this date in September of 2014, there have been at least 3 fires in the area this summer alone, one of those occurring within the roadless area boundary.
Hi everybody, this is Tim Boyce, Fuel Specialist on the Blue Mountain Ranger District. And now we're going to talk a little bit about the fire potential in the Magone project. So what we did was we modeled potential fire behavior in the project area based on each stand. And these are the outputs from that model run. A couple things to keep in mind, this was based just on the forested acres, and we also ran this model based on a worst case scenario day, 90 degrees, humidity's in the teens, windy, fine dead fuel moisture is a 3, and live fuel moisture is 80%. So hottest, driest day of the summer. So I'll just go through the definitions of these types of fires. So active crown fire, that's a situation where fire is able to move from the surface through ladder fuels and into the crowns and actually make sustained runs through the crowns. Conditional crown fire is somewhat hypothetical. In this case, there's not enough surface or ladder fuels to actually lift the fire into the crowns, but the crown bulk density is such that if fire were in the crowns, it could actually carry through the crowns. So there could be a scenario where one of these conditional crown polygons or stands is adjacent to an area that could have passive or active crown fire. So that crown fire could hit this conditional crown area and continue to move through the crowns. Passive crown fire is basically an intermittent crown fire. You'll have anywhere from single tree torching to groups of trees torching. You may lose patches of timber, acre, 5 acres, 50 acres, and so on. And surface fire is just simply fire that spreads through the surface fuels. I want to mention that just because it's surface fire doesn't mean that mortality is not occurring. So this map shows what we just talked about, the fire types from the previous slide. And just like the numbers said, or a little over half the area actually is modeled to exhibit surface fire should a fire start on those worst case scenario days. But what I also look at here, you can see the WUI on there, you can see the roadless boundary, the rec site, and then the several miles of forest land that's adjacent to private land. When I look at all those areas, I see a great deal of crown fire potential. Also the road systems, you look along the road systems, which essentially become escape routes for the public should a fire occur, and adjacent to those routes you see the potential for different types of crown fire. And I just also looking real quick at this slide, I didn't do the numbers, but half the roadless area it's probably crown fire, and half surface fire. So the model will also put out potential flame lengths. So we built this map with flame lengths on it. So 0 to 4 foot flame lengths are the yellowish color, tannish color. So fires in these stands with those flame lengths are going to present little to moderate resistance to control. We can usually get in there. Ground forces with hand tools can control these types of fires. Everything else, so 4 to 8 foot flame lengths, still a little more resistant to control, but we can still use direct attack. We're going to need the help of engines, dozers, probably aerial resources. When you get into the 8 to 15 range, direct attack's probably not an option anymore. We're going to have to back off, and depending, if we don't back off far enough, even indirect attack can be questionable. We're going to have to get way out ahead of these fires, and again, use all the equipment, the engines, dozers, and the aircraft, to try and facilitate indirect tactics. And then anything over 15, essentially no form of attack is going to be successful. At this point, you're just waiting for a change in the weather or a change in the fuel model. So again, I want to point out on this slide the areas around the wreck site, particularly to the northeast of it, along the roads, there in the WUI, along the forest and private boundary. All these areas are showing the model is telling us that we're going to have flame lengths over 4 feet. Okay, we're going to change gears a little here. Talk about the fire regimes in the area. If you think back to the plant association groups, there's 64% of the upland forest is warm dry, and another 16 is hot dry. So around 80% fall into those two plant associations, and those two associations would typically be fire regime 1, frequent low intensity fires that occur 0 to 35 years apart. And that's what we're observing as we're out there in the area. We've got a lot of stands that would be classic open pine stands, which were typically had frequent low severity fires. And then also when you look at the mixed conifer, you can see that it's also been dominated by ponderosa pine, and a lot of the understory is basically encroachment from other species. And this has happened because fire hasn't been allowed to take its natural course on the land. If you want to look at any of this stuff a little more in depth, here's a list of references, and thank you for your time.